we won't be supporting this bill.
I call Paul Goldsmith.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. It's my pleasure to speak on this bill here, the Taxation Annual Rates Returns Filings and Remedial Matters Bill. And I was pleased to receive and listen to David Parker's history lesson on tax a couple of speeches ago, talking about the great contribution that the Labour Party made back in the 40s and 50s to the New Zealand. Back then, of course, Labour bequeathed top tax rates in the high 70%, 78%, I think it was. Company tax was also up around that region, and that really is what David Parker, I think, wants and would hope for, and Clayton Cosgrove. Why don't they come out and scream it and say, let's go back to those limits, like our friend, the French president, is trying to reassert today, because that's what they stand for, and I'm sure the Greens would support that as well. Get it back up into the 70%. That's what we need. That's what we need to get the economy going again. And I suppose tax is an important thing for the well, it's a big part of politics. Taking money off some people, taking money off some people in order to give to other people is 9/10 about what politics is about, and there are a lot of moral hazards in the process of taking from one to give to the other. And it all comes down to perceptions of fairness. What is fair? And on the other side, they do tend to concentrate on fairness being about smoothing out incomes in order to help the poor. And there's a strong element of redistribution in our tax system reflecting that view. At the other side, it's also fair to reward effort. And I'm sure people over there will understand that if they're doing a good job as a caucus member, they expect to be rewarded with promotion, and that leads to all sorts of arguments. So so it's also a question of, is it fair to debase the currency by printing money, for example, and dilute savings? I don't think it is. Is it fair to tax capital gains, as Labour and the Greens want to do so much, when half of a capital gain is purely inflation? So why should you be taxed for that? That doesn't seem very fair to me. So it was also interesting, I thought, to hear Russell Norman talking about the signals that the tax system sends in the ETS and all that. He understands the logic that if you don't want something, you tax it, and you're trying to steer people away from something, you tax it. But again, he doesn't seem to accept that same logic when it comes to high income tax rates, which he always advocates for, and doesn't accept that if you have high income tax rates, you may undermine people's incentive to work. Which is a pretty strong signal to be sending through the tax system. So, by way of those broader comments, I want to draw a little bit closer to the Act itself. And this bill is really the latest in latest piece of tax legislation aimed at making the tax system simpler and fairer for people and for businesses. And it comes after some very substantial changes to the tax system that this government brought through a few years ago, and continues with maintaining and keeping the tax system fit and healthy, and also responding to circumstances. And so the SOP, which relates to benefiting quake victims, is an important part of this legislation. It's been nearly 18 months since that earthquake, and this SOP brings in a whole issues about tax depreciation, rollover rules, changing the year in which income or expenditure is recognised in some circumstances because of the earthquake, and extending rollover relief to properties held on revenue account and which has not been demolished. So I think these are all important things to be introduced, and I support this third reading, and the sooner this legislation becomes law, the better for the country. Thank you, Mr Speaker.
Andrew Williams.
Thank you, Mr Speaker.